Hi there everybody, I'm Fred Thomas and you are watching All Things Bike, and today we are speaking with Heidi Parker, Associate Professor at University of Southern Maine, Stephanie Makoujy of Tall Socks Racing, and Nicole of Grit Grinders and Ladies All Ride. Thanks everybody to the show. Nicole, I got that name wrong. It's Grit Clinics.
You got it, Fred.
Jeez, sorry. But
no worries.
Thanks for coming down. And today we're talking about, I think, a pretty important topic. And I'm going to start with you, Heidi. Tell us about gender inequality in sports.
Well, it's certainly nothing new. It's interesting, actually. Title IX was passed in 1972, and in the many years that have followed, the amount of participation for women is up. I mean, we have more opportunities for girls and women to participate in sports now than we ever have. But there's still great disparity in the opportunities for women in terms of pay, in terms of how women are talked about in the media, how their events are produced, the time that they get in terms of coverage in, whether it's on the newspaper, websites, media, that sort of thing. Right. And still the general sense of how we treat them and feel about them is not equal to their male counterparts.
And why is that? Is it because of society, or is it because the sport is promoted more, or, I mean, is there?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, historically we've looked at, we have our definitions of what it means to be male and what it means to be female, and what traits that people should possess if you're male and what traits you should possess if you're female. And when you think of what it is to be athlete, to be an athlete, most of those traits that we ascribe to good athletes sit on the male side. So there's a much more seamless integration there between male and athlete. And when you take a female, and now they're being aggressive and tough and strong and powerful, and all these words that we traditionally have used in our society to describe men, but this person is also a female. You know, how do we make sense of that? And so I think there is you know, some of society that struggles with making sense of that, and we do things, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, that will disparage women and try to keep them in that stereotypical female role, even though they're athletes. And we see differences even in sports, you know, sports that are historically more feminine, which really have those traits that we would ascribe to more females, that are really, you know, focus on grace and beauty, whether it's you know, ballet or you know, figure skating, some of those sports, versus, you know, softball, basketball, you know, cyclocross, something like that. You know, we expect different traits from those, and we treat those sports and those athletes differently. Right.
I mean, so when you study this this topic, is there a sport or sports that constantly pop up as an example?
Of which that?
Of just sort of gender inequality. You know, writ large. Let's say men's tennis versus women's tennis, and of course, you know, the background comparison that we're all interested in here is men's professional cycling and women's cycling. But let's digress for a second and look at tennis.
Yeah, well, tennis is an interesting sport. It's one that doesn't have full equality, actually, between the men and the women. We expect our male athletes to play, you know, best 3 out of 5. Our women's athletes play best 2 out of 3. And so even just the competitions themselves, we haven't yet let women be fully equal participants, or have the same level of participation, if you will.
Is that fair? I mean, if it were totally equal, would the women have to play the same length of
yeah, why not? I mean, you know, women run the marathons that are 26.2, same as men.
That's right. They just did that on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other examples where men and women compete side by side, and you know, women have no issue with that.
Well, I mean, have you spent any time looking at the professional cycling scene, and have you been able to make any observations about it? or is it a sport that you haven't really followed?
I personally don't follow cycling as much as I do some other sports.
What?
Sorry.
I know, this is
although
crazy.
I'm
What are you
excited.
talking
I'm
about?
No, it's something
excited to
new.
learn more about it
Yeah,
from experts here.
Yeah, well, you're in the company of two real experts. and
Absolutely.
they-
But the little bit I have seen and read, I don't see anything that is unusual compared to a lot of other women's sports. I mean, these are issues that are happening across the spectrum of women's sports.
Right.
You know, going back to tennis for your example for a minute, the way we expect women to dress, you know, we police that. We police, you know, what they can wear, what they can say, you know, what they must look like. The best women's tennis player we've probably ever seen up until recently was not the #1 earner in terms of endorsements.
Who would that be? I don't know.
So Serena Williams
Okay.
is probably one of the best women's tennis players the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
And even myself doing that, I shouldn't even qualify it as women's tennis player. She's probably she is the most dominant tennis player the world has seen. And yet one of her counterparts, who is white, blonde, fit a more stereotypical image of what a female should look like, was out earning her in terms of endorsement dollars for many, many years, even though she wasn't as successful.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so there is, even within women's sport, there's discrepancies in pay and compensation.
Yeah.
And is that I guess it has nothing to do with skill, but why is it? I mean, is it just the viewership then? Is it just more people watch?
Well, the media companies would like you to believe that.
Okay.
But you have to understand that that viewership is not a singular, straight line to,
Right.
Fans, viewers. We get lots of viewers, so we'll give participants more money or more prize earnings, those sorts of things. It's a mediated experience, and so what we see is that you've got less money being given to produce women's sports, so less cameras, less camera angles, less graphics, less lighting, less microphones to capture crowd noise, and then you have a difference in how we speak about women athletes, right? So we often infantilize them, right? So we may call them by their first name. We call them girl instead of woman. I mean, you would never call a male professional athlete, a boy, right? It makes him seem like a child, and yet we do that often for female athletes. And so there's a combination of things that you have fan, and then you have this mediated experience to get to how exciting.
A prism.
How exciting is this? Well, it's hard to really judge that because of all of these lenses that it's been, we're viewing it through.
Fascinating. Well, how could we change things, or is there? I mean, what are some ideas on that? Yeah,
We're going to solve that right
right
here.
We have time.
Hey, I know we got time and we got the brain power. So yeah, I mean, and you guys, by all means, chip in.
Well, I mean, like what you said about Serena Williams, I think about Marianne Vos, who is bar none, one of the best cyclists in the world, male or female. I mean, she has been world track champion in the pursuit and other events, world cyclocross champion 7, 8, 9 times, more.
That's
maybe.
Right, yeah.
Road champion, world road champion. I mean, across all disciplines, there's very few people, males included, who have accomplished what she has accomplished.
Right.
But no one's talking about Marianne Vos, and she certainly is not making what Peter Sagan is making, and she definitely has more rainbow bands than he does.
Yeah.
So why is that?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I thought it was a perception that somehow people think that men's cycling is more exciting.
They do.
But
So
is that because of me, or
no? So they have that perception.
Yes,
Right.
It's fascinating research.
Yeah.
So people have this perception that men's sport is more interesting, or is more exciting, right?
Yeah.
But there is research that if you put sensors on somebody to measure their arousal level, right, and then you show them a women's event, measure the arousal level, and then show them a men's event, right? It's exactly the same. Physiologically, their body is responding the same way. But then if you ask them which is more exciting, their perception is, oh, the men's event is way more exciting. But that's not true based on how their body's responding. They've been conditioned to believe that men's sporting events is more exciting.
Yeah, well,
and we don't challenge those perceptions enough. And even the research that supports this doesn't filter down to the practitioners and industry, folks who are putting on these events and spending the money to advertise in these events and things like that.
Somehow it gets the excitement gets lost. But whenever I watch a women's cyclocross race, it's exciting for me in the sense that there's no way I could ever do what these women are doing, because they're bunny hopping barriers and carrying their bikes. I mean, I can do it, but in that sort of race environment, it's beyond my ability.
And how many women
what do they think?
Beat the times for men? And we don't talk about that, right? We look at it as two separate events, the men race and the women race.
Yeah.
But how many? It's the same course.
Yeah,
right. And
right.
how many women actually are faster than many men? I mean, the same goes for the marathon this past weekend in New York. I mean, how many women beat thousands of men?
Yeah.
And all we talk about is, oh, they're not as fast as the elite men.
Yeah, right. Or it's it's a great
actually
point.
It's actually a continuum, right? It's not these two separate things. It's actually a continuum.
Was there anyone who is working on I mean, for example, organizers or educators or associations? Is there anyone working on changing this, as far as you know?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a plethora of research out there that certainly I've been a part of some of it, and I have amazing colleagues across the sport management field that are doing some really great work. And it's the age-old question, though. You've got this great research.
Yeah, how do you get it out there?
How do you communicate it to practitioners who are on the ground making these decisions? And not only communicate it, how do you get them to believe it, right?
Yeah.
And how do you impact change? You've got industry personnel saying, well, we're not going to spend the money to produce this event, this women's event, like we would a men's event, if we can't get advertisers to buy ads, because that's how we make our money. Right. And advertisers are like, well, nobody's interested in women's sports, so why would we spend money to buy ads? So it's kind of this circular.
Sounds like a circle.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
It sounds a lot like a circle.
Yeah, but that when, for example, Stephanie, when you look at Bicycling Magazine and Nicole also, when you look at all the media, cycling media platforms, do you get the sense that it's still a man's world and that they're marketing?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
how so? I mean, is it always?
It just, for instance, I mean, women only race 45 minutes in a cyclocross race. That's the women's elite race, 45 minutes. The men's is an hour.
Yeah.
Well, like, you can't give the women that, like, we can't make it that 15 extra minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Where did that come from?
Of course you can.
Of course we can.
Is that an organizer decision, or is that USA Cycling?
No, that's a USA Cycling rule.
Right. Wow.
And it's a UCI rule as well. That 45 minutes, you want to make it so once the last lap happens, it's about 45 minutes. They want to be over 45 minutes, but not over an hour.
Right. Yeah, well,
whereas men, you want to be over an hour.
Right.
Probably not an hour and 10, but things happen.
But what about in a local race? I mean, would you have been able to have had the open women's category race for an hour if you had wanted it to be that way as an organizer?
Well, that would be a little bit of a jump from the norm. You can, there's with enough notice and authorization of it from USA Cycling, you could ask for permission on things and such as that.
Okay.
But it would
Maybe
be a step away from the norm.
You have to ask permission. Okay.
So,
For more than 45 minutes, USA Cycling.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the step that the race organizers are taking with events that we're seeing these days is they're moving the elite women's race to the coveted men's race time slot on the schedule to showcase women's cycling more.
Right, yeah, I've seen that.
Which has been nice to see.
Yeah.
Verge cycling, the series for cyclocross has made a step to doing that for all the races. Unfortunately, USAC or UCI put the lockdown on it for the first race of the series.
So the women weren't allowed to start.
They weren't allowed to make the shift, but I think they were able to going forward. I think they were able to get permission on the rest of them. I'm not entirely sure, but there are a number of events across the U.S. that UCI, like Waterloo, for instance, will have the women's race and the men's time slot for this season coming up, which is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can we go back to the Waterloo race for a second?
Sure, yeah.
And how exciting the race between Marion Voss and Maine's own Ellen Noble.
Yeah. What happened? Yeah, I mean, who won? I didn't even know.
It was one of the
Marianne, right?
Yeah, one of the most exciting races I think I've watched in a long time. I mean, besides the Rio Olympics women's road race, that was also
very exciting. Yeah,
in my opinion, more exciting than the men's race.
And what happened in the end? I mean, just explain how the finish panned out.
They were, just trading first place all race, and you could tell they were just at their limit and just so equally matched that it just, one couldn't one up the other just simply. And Ellen was bunny hopping the barriers and
how she did that.
And Marianne Voss won.
Yeah.
But for someone who has all these world titles, to look at Ellen after the race and just, you could tell that she was just so impressed and so happy to have raced with someone that was just so good. To really test her.
Yeah, that's right, and made her nervous, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure the fans were like.
And I mean, and Ellen is young, and she's just getting after it. And that race, I don't know what happened with the men's race. I don't even know who won.
Yeah, I'm the wrong guy to ask, I'm afraid.
But that's the thing, is that.
But that to me speaks volumes.
Sure, yeah.
That race is memorable, the men's race is not. So this brings us back to, why isn't the media attention, hey, watch this. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This one's bunny hopping the barriers, she's running them, they're still even. It's
just on that. I mean, are you able to bunny hop a barrier? I mean, have you been? It's because she's got a whole campaign about that.
I've raced against Ellen Noble, but more likely I've just kind of been on the course at the same time as Ellen.
Well, at least you started. No. I mean.
And she's so sweet and so amazing, and I'm glad she can bunny hop the barriers.
Well, it's not easy. I mean,
no. I have to work on Monday.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's why I don't bunny hop the barriers.
And you can put an end to your race. But I mean, she's got her campaign, bunny hop the patriarchy.
Yep.
And I mean, is it working? Is it helping?
I think it's definitely helping. I think it definitely gives a good, a brand and a good face, and shows that this needs attention. Let's give it attention.
Right.
If the men can do it, Ellen can do it too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and having to check with UCI to make your race an hour rather than 45 minutes, having to get permission to do that seems a patriarchy of some sort on some level.
It definitely is.
But
it's not surprising, though. I mean, if you look at institutions we have and how they control women's sports, for instance, women's volleyball, just as an example, there are rules in the Olympics about how short the shorts must be for volleyball players.
How short is right?
Right. So they can't actually
wear. It can't be too long.
Right. They can't be too long.
Okay.
We want to keep them in skimpier outfits.
Wow.
And it's not for a competitive reason, right? If there was a competitive advantage to be gained by being in skimpier clothing, the men would be in skimpier clothing.
Oh,
same with the beach volleyball and things like that. And so, but this is controlled at the high levels of administration in sport. So it's not surprising that you would have to ask permission for them to allow women to compete for 15 more minutes.
Well, related to that, are you familiar with the podium girl in cycling?
Yes.
I mean, do you tell us? Is the podium girl in your view? Does it give cycling a negative perception, or I mean, because it's the only sport I think that has something like it.
Yeah, I would say there's probably something similar in
car racing, maybe.
Yes, I was going to say in NASCAR. Yeah.
That's good to know.
So it reinforces this idea that women are there for the male gaze. to look at, to be something pretty, to be a sex object, right? And I don't think that that's the message that I would want to be sending for my sport.
Yeah.
And it also makes a lot of assumptions about your racers, that even in the male racers, that they want a female.
Yeah, that's true.
To be presenting them things, and I don't think that's fair. I mean, it reinforces old stereotypes, and I think is probably a very outdated.
Yeah, well, I mean, it probably has its origins in the sort of the deepest sort of history of European cycling. But what do you guys think? I mean, Stephanie?
I know last year, maybe the year before, at the Tour of America's Dairyland, there was a lot of pushback from female racers about the podium girls.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
do we really need
we've moved
podium
on.
girls? Yeah, we've moved on. Like, come on.
What do you think, Nicole?
As a racer, my only experience with that is I was at a high-level race where there were podium girls, and they actually were utilized for the women's awards as well. I thought that was sweet.
Yeah.
As a child, I'm going back a little bit here. I'm trying to be mature about this, but I honestly think the podium girls I always did. It's sort of ingrained in me. That's silly, and so I used to mock them. Like play games and mock them. And I'm not disrespect to them as human beings, but just the idea of it, just the whole thing seemed silly to me growing up in the day and age that I am, in 2018, and seeing this happening, kind of scratching my head, like, what is that?
Yeah.
Why are we still utilizing this?
What about the idea?
It doesn't fit into today's concepts.
Or why
Fair
aren't
enough,
there
yeah.
podium men?
Podium boys. Yeah, that was
Podium
my
boys.
next question.
Still,
I mean,
even then, I'd be
it
like,
still makes a lot
I
of
don't.
assumptions about your racers, and
Right, and I don't really want that either.
yeah, I mean, that would be sort of creepy, don't you think? I mean, there's some.
To a certain
What would
degree.
he look like, and who would he be, and sort of.
I think there is a photo on Down East's Facebook with Matt Moon as a podium guy, though. So look that up.
Matt, if you're watching
Matt,
this.
if you're watching, they're coming for you.
That's right. Well,
I think the Scarborough Crit Series a few years ago.
Well, we can bring that to Hank, but I mean, I think, I mean, I think it's probably something that it's a historical. What's the word? It's an anachronistic thing that's been around, and hopefully it'll sort of move on, but hopefully no one will.
And it definitely serves to reinforce stereotypes about women, right? That they're there to look pretty and to serve, typically men.
Yeah,
right?
I know, but or maybe Jean-Claude or Giuseppe, back in 1910 was spending too much time on his bike, so his parents said, well, let's get him out there. And,
there's podium girls.
And maybe,
Don't you want to win this race?
Wishful thinking. Yeah, all right, but Nicole, tell us a little bit about the economics of putting on a bike race and how that affects prize money.
Sure. So I've put a little bit of thought into this, Fred, to try to come to a conclusion on that, and that is the smaller scale races or the larger scale, 100 racers or 1,000 racers, that prize money is still going to be a budget item for the event, and obviously that budget item is going to be a lot larger for the larger scale event with bigger prize purses.
Right.
Generally speaking, that item could be something a sponsor could support, which would be lovely if that could be worked out, and also generally speaking, it's a marketing expense. So the more money you can be handing over on the podium, and how deep that goes, whether it's 1 through 10 or 1 through 3,
right.
That could be a $5 prize purse when you get to place 10, but hey, it's something.
It's still something,
right?
Yeah.
It's still marketing. It's still supporting that top 10 versus that top 3 if you can, and it's economy of scale, just like with anything else.
Right, and so it does. A lot of it is the turnout and how many people are signing up for the event and how big it is.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's also one of those risks that the promoter takes as
Right.
far as you got to make that call up front, and how deep are you going to pay out, and how much money, and that's also going to be a risk, right? Because
Sure.
you could say up front that you're going to give out X amount of dollars, but you only get so many racers. So
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you
yeah.
know you end up eating that.
Do you find sponsors are more willing to support prize money for men's events or men's top finishers than women's? Or when you approach them to be a sponsor, do you even bring that up?
It's more how much media is the event getting,
Yep.
and so
Yep.
their brand can get some coverage, and it's also they want to support juniors and those subcategories, which is great. So the nice thing about most cycling events is that there's typically a younger racing field, and cyclocross is a neat event in the sense that you can go for the day and you can watch someone race who's 5 and you can watch someone race who's 95 all within the same day, which is really neat. So yeah, the sponsor generally wants to make sure they're getting coverage and also supporting whatever community that they've decided to
connected to.
Yeah.
Is the promise of prize money, is that very important for women racers, or what's driving?
Honestly, I'd rather see prize money go away.
Interesting.
I don't need it.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, knowing what
At a
we
certain
know
level, yeah.
about costs for bike racing, the gear is expensive, the travel is expensive. Sometimes there's hotel stays involved. I'm not going to make money at this. This is a hobby. It's something I enjoy. It's something I do to stay fit.
Right.
And I've made a lot of friends doing this. And I think I never look at a race and go, oh, well, there's prize money. I'll sign up for this one. It's not my decision making.
Right.
I'd rather see, prize payouts for the women's elite and men's elite, 5 deep, that's it, equal payout. And, the rest of the categories, it's a huge marketing expense. Right, you get merchandise that comes from sponsors, or, my mom made you this homemade apple pie, enjoy it on the ride home. Those are some of the best prizes I've ever gotten, are,
that's true.
baked goods, or, maybe some beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But to me, that's not going to deter me from going to a race.
Yeah.
But what will deter me from going to a race is if the prize payout for men and women is different.
Right.
If it's not equal payout, then I won't go.
Yeah, and that's changed a little bit. I think some organizers have made a point of making sure that is it completely equal, or it's
generally it's equal for the elite fields.
Right. I mean, as a 50 plus, cyclocross, not a very frequent racer, I don't need prize money. If on the outside, very remote chance that I would finish in the money.
Right. So
I don't need $10
why offer a masters category prize money? It just seems like it detracts from what the event promoter can do.
Yeah.
As far as putting on the race and easing the burden, I think.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
The event promoter or the club. A lot of times clubs put on events.
Yeah.
And that money's got to come from somewhere.
It's interesting that you say that the prize money for the elite racers is the same for men and women, which I think is fantastic. But again, that's not something you see across all sports.
No, and it's not across all races. There's certainly races still out there that aren't equal payout, and I avoid them. But I think New England in general, I can't speak to much outside of that. Occasionally I race in New York, but New England in general, they're really good about having equal payout.
I think New England has been more pioneer in that sense.
Yes.
It does help that there are some really strong junior development programs in New England. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine has started some stuff up, but it's hasn't been as strong as some of the other states' junior development programs. And we want our juniors to grow up in the sport and stay in it, and also see that it is a gender equal sport, because they're participating with their friends, or both boys and girls. And when you get to a certain level and they start to see, wait a minute, why is my friend Frank getting more money than me when I'm finishing first just like he is in his race?
Well, and we did the same course.
Why is that? So I think people involved with the sport in New England have really set a good example for the rest of the U.S., and now Europe is sort of dragging behind, and what those rules and policies are, and gender equality. And I like to see the sport of cycling continue in the way it is, and trying to even things out with UCI, making some small little changes to support those changes, and maybe setting a better example for other sports as we do this.
Yeah, well, I think, if we keep, bringing it up, and I think information is so much more efficient now.
And social media, the way it is given women a chance to have a louder voice. And so you're hearing more and more about gender equality, and there's a lot of back and forth banter on social media, right? And then companies or organizers hear these things.
I mean, this is direct with Ellen's Bunny Hop the Patriarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a social media campaign that has had, I think, extreme success.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere Ellen goes, people see her bunny hop, and they are just stoked about that.
And you talk about change. How does change happen? And this is a great example of that, when you've got the participants themselves saying, we're not going to race.
I won't go.
Unless there are equal payouts. And then you get people who are in positions of power, event organizers and things like that, recognizing that and supporting that, and saying, why would we pay them differently? Why would we treat them differently? And so the change starts to happen that way as well.
Yeah, no,
it filters up too.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think the message is getting out. At least the ASO, the organization that runs the Tour de France, they had a women's Tour de France that was just one day, but now they're they're working on making it a 10-day event, making it a real stage race, and putting it in the same geographic area as the Tour de France. So it's not something that's happening remotely.
On a local level, NEBRA, New England Bicycle Racing Association, their board has been jam-packed with some phenomenal people that are changing the face of cycling and make it more equal for men and women. Aaron Facone, Lauren Leclerc, Adam Meyerson, J.D. Billodreau, just to name a few. I mean, they've been pushing, setting such a great example that USA Cycling has adopted a lot of the policies or rules involving gender equality.
That's true. I think Adam Meyerson, he puts on a cyclocross race. There's 2 days. It's a weekend, both days racing, and it's a UCI event. And I think he was probably one of the first that said equal payout. That just makes sense, and he's been doing it for years.
Yeah,
and that's what he has just stuck to, because that's what he believes, and it's a phenomenal success, and people go.
Yeah, right.
And they respect him as a racer, and then as an organizer as well, and look to him for those sorts of things and changes.
Yeah, so it sounds like the New England cycling, in terms of the organizers and the racers, it sounds like there's change afoot, and people are enlightened on some level. I wanted to talk about Jingle Cross, the Jingle Cross announcers, because that was the story that sort of brought this topic up, and you're probably familiar, but it's a story that came out of Jingle Cross, which is that huge cyclocross race, 3 days. It's on the UCI calendar.
Yeah, it's a World Cup race.
World Cup, thousands of participants, professional, from all over the world, as well as amateurs. And the organizers hired 2 announcers to provide the announcing services, Larry Longo and Brad Soner. And I guess they did the announcing for the whole thing, but during the women's race, the way Bicycling Magazine described it, they included in their comments a constant barrage of gendered and derogatory comments that dismissed the skills of the women riders and suggested that they and all women shouldn't be at the race. And it was, I think, Lindsay Knight who expressed who's an amateur who was racing in the category 1-2 race for the whole weekend, expressed her disappointment about the comments that were coming out on her Instagram feed, and shared it with her numerous followers and USA Cycling and the organizers. And you know, quite quickly, these organizations were apologizing, issuing statements, and severing the relationship with the announcers. So it seemed like this story, you know, got in everybody's news feed pretty quickly. And I read about it, and I just and I want to ask you the question: why do you think it happened? And also, I mean, how could it have happened? It seemed like it was a surprise to see something like this.
It doesn't surprise me. I think that there is still a number of people who see women participating in sport as sort of outsiders. They shouldn't be there, right? Their roles are clearly something else. Why are we allowing them to participate? Mm-hmm. And it's a power play, right? Mm-hmm. So even if they are here, let's disparage them. Let's talk about them being wives and girlfriends and put them back in their place, right? Wow. It's a way of maintaining sort of this male power, if you will. Yeah. What concerns me is the fact that the race organizers allowed it to go on for 3 days, unchecked. And I think that's a breakdown. That's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So, is it a problem that it's happening? Absolutely. But that piece, I guess, unfortunately, doesn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. But if it's happening day one, I think it should be shut down right away. Yeah. And it shouldn't go on for the duration of a 3-day event. Brad
Soner expressed regret when he finally came time to apologize. He felt he should have said something. But I guess, you know, it's, you know.
But it normalizes the behavior, though.
Yeah, that's right. Well, why?
Yeah. But it didn't, like she said, it took 3 days. Yeah. And someone with an Instagram that has a lot of followers, and this is back to social media, mm-hmm. and the general public to be like, this isn't right. There's something wrong here, before the organizations finally were like, maybe this wasn't a good call. Maybe this isn't okay. Yeah. But it's that push from everyone else
that does it.
That takes it to that final, oh, well, we're sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is the cyclocross atmosphere is I mean, describe it. I mean, did that have something to do with it, or is it? I don't know, but.
Cyclocross does have a history of heckling that mm-hmm. is part of the sport, but it's in fun, I believe. And I've been heckled. You've probably been heckled. Absolutely. We've all been heckled, and it's all in good fun. And I've never been heckled to the point where it's given me pause. Yeah. And so I think there is a culture there, but they took it, they took that next step, and the line was back there, and they crossed it.
I see.
And that was the problem.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, Nicole, what was your reaction when you saw this coming through, especially from the perspective of an organizer?
Right, from that perspective, Fred, I wasn't surprised that it happened. Just like Heidi said, it's unfortunate. And if I put on my organizer's cap, I would say there may have been some questions that need to be answered first before the organizers could speak up about the situation and go mm-hmm. public mm-hmm. with their apologies and everything else that they needed to address, like firing that announcer. There's a lot of stuff going on at a big race like that, and they're probably buried with work. You hire someone, you expect them to do their job, and I don't think anyone expected that, right? Sure. Yeah. So there's that. I'm very impressed with Lindsay's speaking out, and love social media for that effect and that trickle down. Yeah. And then that it's there for it to happen. So there's that, and still kind of aghast and surprised by the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Personally, I've had to change announcers, but it's not something I've been able to do mid-race. But I've had to talk to them about, like, nothing to that extent, but just like, this enthusiasm kind of went down before when the women's race was happening. I was kind of this isn't. That's not what I want in my event. So I've mm-hmm. had to say some things, and then just go with someone else another time. Yeah. And that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? Yeah. And then as a racer, I think that for someone to say something to that effect, like what you said, Stephanie, enough to give me pause. I haven't experienced that as a bike rider in general. Growing up, loving the sport, I remember going into bike shops and being the only girl there, looking at all the gear and stuff, and some sales people there who are men, just not giving me the time of day. And those experiences have definitely stuck with me, and maybe even sort of lit a fire a little bit too, on the bike too, to be like, hey, I'm a girl or woman, look what I'm doing, I'm just as fast, if not faster than some of these men. And that's the whole Title IX effect too, and growing up in this day and age and feeling empowered by the sport. And also as a coach, being able to share that empowerment with other women who are coming in and going, hey, I want to feel this energy too, because there is a lot of positive vibe that we're not going to let this one bad apple ruin it for all of us.
No, it's definitely true. The cycling community in general is just, I think, very supportive of anyone who's just willing to get out there. It's a hard sport, and if you're willing to really stick with it, the feeling is, okay, well, you're one of us. We all suffer together. This is all terrible, and we love it. It's weird, but we do. And I've raced a lot, and with women who have just been so supportive. But on the flip side of that, I've done a lot of group rides with men. I've actually raced in men's races, and I think in New England they are just as supportive, and I've been given helping hands from men just as many times as women. They're just glad you're there. So I think that is the most shocking part of what happened with that announcer. Is that's not what I expect.
Right.
I expect different from the cycling community, because I've experienced a lot different than that. I've always felt very welcomed and at home. These are my people.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I mean, it sounds like it was a one-off.
I also think that just across sports, we allow sexism in a way that we don't maybe allow some other isms, if you will. If an announcer were making very racist comments, would we have let that go on for 3 days? As a community of cyclists, as consumers that are there watching with their family and friends, I don't know. I just think there is a level of sexism that we're okay with as a society that happens in sport. And my hope is that we can get to a point where it is completely as unacceptable as a lot of other prejudice that people may have that may express in some ways. Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, I think let's work on it. We'll just keep on doing what we do and keep the information flowing. And this has been a great chat. You want to add any last observations? I think we've covered a lot of great ground here.
I think we did. We just solved the problem.
I know. Well, that's right.
That's how I feel.
Thanks,
We solved it right here.
I know. Well, let's keep on working on it, and I'll do what I can. My daughter is 18, and I'll try and get her to get out there and bunny hop the patriarchy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Go run right through it, and that's great. Thanks so much, you guys, for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that was Heidi Parker, Associate Professor at University of Southern Maine, and Stephanie Makoujy of Tall Socks Racing, and Nicole Sir of Grit Clinic and All Ladies Ride. If you want to learn more about this conversation, I imagine you can reach out to them on Facebook and continue the conversation there. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon.
All Things Bike is brought to you by FitWorks, rider-first bike fitting, rider-matched bike sales. Locations in Peabody, Massachusetts, Waitsfield, Vermont, and Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. And Frame and Wheel, eBay selling services for cyclists, bike shops, and bicycle companies. Time, space, cash. Pick 3. And AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future.